are in a hive. If you've read the book, you already know. How many bees do you think are in one hive? Thousands? Yes, 30 to 50,000 bees are in a hive. 2/3 of them are foraging maidens. So I want to read a section, so just bear with me, I'll break it up. These foraging maidens are the bees that are out in the world of wind and light and flowers. What do you think those bees, those foraging maidens, are doing while they're out in the world of wind, flowers, and light? Foraging what? They're, not flowers. Pollen and nectar, yes, but listen to this, there's more to the story. The bees have shared with me a wondrous epic story of mineral migration, planetary ethers, light layering, fairies and gnomes, and memory made into physical matter. Some of these messages from the bees are supported by new and ever more mind-boggling research on honeybees and their extraordinary worlds. We understand that bees collect nectar and pollinate flowers, but as the bees explain, and she's a listener to bees at a very deep level, they endeavor to collect only the very best nectar and pollen from the healthiest flowers. This nectar and pollen must be collected at specific times of the day and at specific developmental stages of the flowering plants. It's also the bee's task to see that those prime plant specimens are able to advance and thrive in accordance with the will and divine directive of the minerals and soil within the broad perception of the unity. Who knew? Bees are exemplars of communication with all beings of creation, as well as with their own kind. Then it talks about the plants. Listen to this, because it's not a one-way experience or communication. The plants themselves are emissaries, co-partners, and feet, if you will, for the mineral kingdom, the realm of the gnomes. According to Rudolf Steiner, the mineral kingdom has a mission and a purpose of its own. The minerals strive to create balance and harmony across the earth. They do their work slowly over long periods of time, moving too subtle to be seen and felt by humans, but their movements are explicitly noticed by nature spirits, plants, and bees. Plant and tree roots draw up minerals and carry the news of each mineral's presence to the air spirits and the insects. The insects can move minerals by eating the plant and moving elsewhere and dying, leaving their mineral-laden carcasses behind, even though these actions seem small. Over eons of time, a great deal of mineral movement is achieved by these means. So that's the world we live in. I won't ask you for a show of hands, but how many of you notice on a daily basis that that's the world you live in? I have a friend in my meditation Sufi group who can see devas. Devas are plant spirits, and she talks to them. When I first heard that 20 years ago, I went, cuckoo! But now I know it's true, because I have experienced it myself, where you can literally be so present that you can communicate with the nature world. So what if you would do that? What if you lived your life being in holy, constant communion with the world of nature, with the bees, the nectar, the pollen, the minerals, the nature spirits. We would be aware of the bees that are foraging. I never thought of it until I read this book. You would be aware in a different way of how pollination happens. I mean, I don't know about you, but since I've been reading this book, I have been experiencing nature in a whole different way. And my awareness of pollination happening has made me not bitch about the pollen and my personal allergies. Right? So then, this idea of the collecting of the nectar. I think most of the time people think of it, oh, that's for me, it's for my food and my honey. No, it's much bigger. And then this idea of the different kinds of communication that they have, that isn't just blah, 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 blah. And then the idea of sharing light with each other, like that. Sharing light with the plants and the flowers around them. This whole metaphor of the oneness of all life and how little we see, feel, know, think about, and embody. So I invite you to think of it as a metaphor for your own, to become more aware, to become more conscious, and to think about your foraging. How do you move through the world? How do you interact with all other beings? How do you pollinate? How do you gather spiritual nourishment and nutrition? How do you gather using only what you need and sharing the rest with all of humanity for the good of all? What does it mean to be of service to the greater whole for us humanity instead of just our own little selves or our little tribes? What does it mean to experience nutrients? Personally, I am someone who's into eating live foods, especially now that I've had a health diagnosis, and I rarely eat dead foods anymore. So it's live plants, it's meats and fish and chicken that are naturally cultivated, and so there's a different experience. I juice every day now, and when I drink my juice, holy mackerel, I feel it move through my body in a way that I'm incredibly grateful. And I praise my immune system all the time. Thank you for doing such a good job keeping me healthy. And so then about communication, we think our communication is just a verbal level, but we already know that there's a lot more communication going on all the time. You don't even have to say anything. People feel you. They know, they understand, they connect. And how does that happen for you? And do you notice that when you step away from the surface and you get more quiet, that the communication that's happening is so much richer? Do you know that you are light? You are light. You are the light of God in this world in a physical form, with the privilege of having incarnated as a human being. And how aware are you that you are light? How do you share your light? How do you care for your own light? How do you keep it bright? And how do you notice that this light is in everyone, everything, everywhere, all the time? And if you and I don't notice it, it's not because it isn't there. It's because we believe something that is not in integrity with the truth already within us. So there's this thing that they talk about in this chapter called wafers. And they're not the kind of wafers that you got in Holy Communion in the Catholic Church. It's not chocolate wafers that you drink or eat with your tea. But it's like an invisible packet of information in the sphere, in the atmosphere of a flower. It hovers just above the flowers, and it has information for the bees, whether it's time to partake of the nectar, the pollen, the communication, or not. It has the potent knowledge of the plants, and it communicates, there's an exchange. How's your wafer doing? And do you notice the wafers of others? So Gail talked so much and so beautifully about this idea of our evolution. You know, the collective consciousness wants you to be afraid. That's why the news is the way it is. And the news is the way it is, so super divided and called fake news, because it wants us to be afraid and it wants us to be hypnotized. So as long as we watch the news and we believe it's the truth, or it scares us, then their task is done, to keep us afraid. The collective consciousness wants us to be afraid, but there is something else happening. There is an evolutionary process taking place, and those who come along are the ones that are not afraid, that are standing in the truth and standing in the love and being a voice for it and being the activity of it to the best of their ability. So my question to you is, do you remember who you really are? Or have you forgotten? And what is the biggest thing that you have forgotten about your true nature? You don't have to answer that, but I want you to really think about that. Are you living your light? Are you living the truth of your very being? Are you living the divine energy? None of us are perfectly, because we have an ego. So it's the awakening that is happening in relationship to our essential beingness that wants to be lived. And so, when and how do you forget is a really good question. Have I forgotten who I really am, what I'm here to be, and what I'm here to do? So the way that we do is we get really quiet. That's why meditation is so powerful. And that's when I smile when people say, I don't know how to do it, or I don't have time, which is the biggest lie we tell ourselves. Because it's in meditation that we're actually listening to the invisible world of light, of truth, of wisdom. It's in the silence that we connect with our sacred self. And there we are given the sacred communication that we need so much to live a fruitful life and to be in service to the whole. So I want to close with a poem that I shared one stanza of last week by Antonio Machado. Last night, it's called. Last night I was sleeping. I dreamt marvelous error, that a spring was breaking out in my heart. I said, along with the secret aqueduct, "Oh water, are you coming to me? Water of a new life that I have never drunk?" Last night I was sleeping. I dreamt marvelous error, that I had a beehive right inside my heart, and the golden bees were making white combs and sweet honey from my old failures. Last night I was sleeping. I dreamt marvelous error, that a fiery sun was giving light inside my heart. I was fiery because I felt warmth as from a hearth, and sun because it gave light and brought tears to my eyes. Last night as I slept, I dreamt marvelous error, that it was God I had here inside my heart. James.